Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services and activities at MedComms So if you go there, you'll find all sorts of information, resources, activities for people who work in and around the global community, working in medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and so on. Also, lots of resources for those people who don't yet work in MedComms, but would like to know more about the business and how to get a job, maybe as a medical writer, account manager, and so on. So lots and lots of resources to go and have a look at. So please do go and have a look. You'll find, for instance, lots and lots of videos. There's about 400 plus videos now at NetworkPharma TV. And a lot of those are recordings of webinars like this. And the fun thing about these webinars is we can get people in from all over talking about a wide variety of topics. And we've got a nice international audience again today who will hopefully join in with their questions. So all good stuff. Today, absolutely delighted to have Matt with us. Matt, I'm not going to steal your thunder at all. We're going to be talking about sustainability, organising events. This is a big part of our events are a big part of our business. Sustainability is a big question. How do we manage events appropriately these days? And I've billed you a little bit as talking about the good, bad, and the ugly. So I'm just going to sort of hand over to you. We're going to have a presentation and then open that up for some Q&A. So over to you, Matt.
No problem. Thank you, Peter. And yes, there is a bit of a good, bad, and the ugly at the end of this, although sadly no brand names will be associated with various tactics. So yes, hello everyone. I'm Matt Gray. I'm the founder of a company called Event Decision. Event Decision helps event planners make better decisions. And one of the major channels in which we do that is in sustainability. Now, I'm conscious that not everyone here is an event organizer or planner by profession. So we will keep it to 15 to 20 minutes of kind of broad overview of sustainability in events with the tongue-in-cheek zombie piece, which we will qualify shortly, and then some tactics about where to look based on real life data, a couple of real life examples. I am looking at the chat box, I believe, and we'll keep an eye on the Q&A. Peter, if you see something whilst I'm otherwise distracted, just shout. And I'm really happy to take questions throughout or during, or we can jump on stuff at the end. So I'm hoping you guys are all seeing our event planner zombies, because it is very much, sustainability is very much the topic of the moment, as it is in many industries, but certainly within the events industry and pharma events industry specifically. And the questions relate to, is practice changing? Are behaviors changing? So we'll have a little look about that. But Event Decision is, let's see if we can move this on. More than all the way to the end. This is going well. Let us just move it back to the beginning.
You've unshared, yeah.
Okay, one sec.
Do you want to start again, Matt?
No, we can, that's fine.
You happy to keep going? Yeah. I'll slice out this bit.
Good old you. No, that's the one. Right. There we go. Should have visibility of it again.
Yeah.
So Event Decision is probably the market leader now in measuring and advising event owners and planners in all things sustainable. There are a great number of people out there. Why this isn't moving on? Shall we try again? Jumping all over the shop. A great number of people advising us that we should be making this transformation from a kind of pre-COVID, pre-sustainable era to a more sustainable era that we're in now. And there are brands that will overtly say, and we're looking at a couple of farmers there that we already work with, that will already state that you need to be able to deliver and plan more sustainable events if they are to work with you. A kind of carrot and stick approach, if you will. A great number of them are already. So some of the things that you may wish to take to your clients after this call, they may be familiar with. So brands within pharma world, Amgen, AstraZeneca, Sanofi, Santen, and so forth, are already trying to do this in a number of ways. The good news is, doing this does support building better events, a better world for all of us. But the motivations do vary, and occasionally they are around buying decisions. A lot of us as individuals, myself included, when we buy a car, for example, the automotives are really good at this. We buy often on sustainable decision-making basis. And event buyers, congresses, sales kickoffs, product launches, marketing events, symposia launches, those buyers are becoming more savvy in this world as well. We're not going to go in the next few minutes off into a climate change discussion, but let's say it's safe to say that a great events contribute a great number of emissions to across the board, because we touch so many different industries and sector as we deliver these things, from aviation, hotel accommodation, food and beverage, energy supply, and so forth. We really sit across a really wide range of different events. Behind all of this, of course, there is a great deal of science. So you or your clients will be hopefully aligned with or members of, whatever the arrangement needs to be, one of these organizations. We don't need to go through them all now, whether it's SBTI, IPCC is the United Nations framework for climate change and reporting. EcoInvent is a wonderful, we think, wonderful database on carbon emissions. And then the family favorite of the greenhouse gas protocol. We're not going to go into the whys and wherefores and how those all work now, but suffice to say, it does sit behind all the products that we offer for certain. The only thing that is absolutely clear is the number one priority for all of those organizations is that we measure. 10 years ago, we weren't able to measure events. But now the data is there, the tools are there for us to be able to look at an event as an entire entity and provide quite detailed information on what the carbon footprint of that event is. That is the measure of how sustainable events are nowadays, but also segment it in terms that event planners understand. So it doesn't matter how big, how complex, where your event is. We divide up measurements and reports usually into these 7 sectors, which can and do include nearly every element of nearly every event. So if you plan events for a living, or if even occasionally you'll be used to looking at them in terms of travel, accommodation, energy, food and beverage, waste, transportation, and materials. Doesn't matter where your event is. Local factors are available. There's someone from the US on this call, there's someone from Nicosia, I think, and someone from Portugal. If your events are being held in those locations, we can now measure uniquely to those destinations using your country's energy mix and your country's food and beverage factors. So it is at country level, and even make amends within that for particularly sustainable or green venues, for example, or within meals looking at between vegetarian and non-vegetarian meals that you may wish to offer. It doesn't matter what your event looks like, whether it's a technical stand build within a congress, measuring a lot of these at the moment. We will take into account the people that build it, the people that take it down, powering the screens and the iPads, the people who come to staff, and so forth. Interestingly, the majority of the carbon footprint associated with most exhibition stands is due to the people traveling to build it and staff it, especially if it's a global congress and you've got people flying into Europe from the States or vice versa. Can be many times more than the actual materials and the stand itself, which are the bits that people see and will pick up on. So like many of these factors, it's hidden where the big carbon factors actually are. Things that we can see easily: plastic bottles, carpet, wooden flats, and funky looking stands. None of those 3 are usually massively significant factors. And we'll go into how you can identify what the factors are in just a sec. So this is an example of a track report from Event Decision. This is it in its entirety, 5 pages, of which really only 2 pages are the ones you want to look at. So we're looking at them there. as I mentioned, we can look at an event in its entirety and say, this is the carbon footprint of all the activity that is associated, including delegate travel, where that data is available, associated with that event, and divide it into sectors that you can look at. Now, the example there we're looking at is somewhat atypical. You would expect the dark blue segment travel to be larger. Certainly for medical meetings where you might be bringing your investigators in, or you might be bringing in global sales management teams from further afield. But it gives you a really good example, a really good idea of where the footprint lies for an event. To give you an example, a business class return flight from Singapore to London, so that's one senior person traveling halfway across the world, has approximately the same carbon footprint as 26,000 half-litre plastic bottles. But what is the thing that a lot of event planners focus on? No plastic bottles on site. And yet you might be flying dozens or even more people around the world, which has a far greater hit on the event's footprint than anything else. Granted, the discussion between doing it all virtually and removing all travel and doing it in person is a different discussion. And we can advise and help with that, but that's for the event owners to decide, do the people need to be there? So there you've got on the left-hand side, you've got your carbon footprint associated with the event. That's reported in both real tons of CO2e, this is real gas, and it's benchmarked, and in percentage terms. On the right-hand side, you're seeing a benchmark. This really helps you as owners understand where you stand when compared with similar events. So we're comparing stand build with stand build on a per square meter basis, and we're comparing conference style or in-person events on a per delegate basis. Just Jacob, I'll come back to you on that set, on your questions there. Good questions there. How do we mitigate? So these are the bits that you can tactically take forward into the workplace and pass on to your events teams or take on board yourselves if you want to. And we've just mentioned the whole virtual versus in-person events scenario. This is the second most important topic within the events industry right now after sustainability. Obviously, the pandemic resulted in a huge increase in the volume and the number of suppliers in the virtual world. Unheard of. And they're really capable, and most of them are really good, but none of them have bridged that gap that we understand how important a live event is. This particular event, because we're geographically dispersed and it's short and so forth, it really suits this channel, this mode of communication. Other events, and these are decisions that you need to make, are uniquely and much better suited to in-person events. That's something that event planners didn't really have to deal with 5 years ago, and didn't. Some are still not, hence the zombie reference. There's a lot more to consider. We have to deal with a number of factors that just weren't around 5 to 10 years ago. So there's the in-person versus live. We call those that are mixed hybrid, and there's a really good place for hybrid. We're already working with a number of societies in terms of their European and UK congresses to analyze the effect of hybrids, taking their congresses into the hybrid realm. So a limited number of in-person delegates, literally limited to 1,000 or 5,000. I think FIRA in Barcelona for one recently was limited to 12,000. If you weren't in that, you had to dial in and watch, and you would miss out on the serendipitous networking, as we tend to call it. So that's one factor that can hugely influence the sustainability of your event. We then move on to your venue selection. You might outsource this to a venue finding agency, or you might do it yourself. There's potential here for huge carbon savings. you can imagine why when aligned with the virtual and in-person. But if you choose, and I know medical guys are somewhat constrained by ABPI and other regulations, but if you choose a venue that is less accessible, let's say somewhere that is not city centre, nearly everyone's going to drive or get taxis. If you choose a far more accessible venue in London or in Birmingham, it depends where your audience is from, you're going to reduce the carbon footprint because people are far happier to travel by public transport to really accessible venues. And you, obviously, as part of your event planning expertise, you're going to make it easy for them to get there and get home. The irony is, within the events industry, at volume, this is a fairly new entry position to look for venues for you and your events. But it's actually one of the biggest factors in terms of how sustainable an event is how easy is it to get there. The third factor linked to the last one is travel and transport. Motivations vary massively here. There's the jumping straight to the chase, the ego part. If you're extremely senior, do you get your own car? Does the car come and pick you up? Does the car take you to the airport? Do you fly at the front of the plane because of by virtue of your position? Those behaviors are beginning to change in some instances, and in others not at all. And they vary by region a lot. We find that perhaps US companies tend to be slightly more hierarchical than some European companies. But it varies within Europe as well, even between sort of mainland Europe and the UK, behavior around how people travel. Suffice to say, and it will be no surprise to any of you, that in order of carbon emissions, flights are right at the top, followed by private vehicles, followed closely, not closely, followed by public transport, whether it's bus, train, subway, any of those. Humans have a proclivity to, we got so used to using our cars and taxis. It's going to take a massive shift to move people to public transport, especially for events, but organizers are getting better at it. So I don't know if any of you have attended an event. I have one or two now where you turn up, and if you've got a ticket from your public transport, you get your free swag, be it digital or otherwise. Or if you don't, if you've got a car park ticket, for example, you don't. To try and change and influence our behavior. Event organizers are really keen to keep their numbers high, so they don't want to affect people not coming, but they do want to try that nudge theory where people are traveling in a more sustainable way to reduce the overall footprint. And food. There's a lot of talk, and we've all heard about how beef especially, but meat generally is less good for the planet. This is what we would call usually a low percentage factor. If you're going to move 500 people for a day's event from a traditional non-vegetarian menu and into a fully plant-based or vegetarian menu, you can expect the footprint of that event to reduce by around about 1%. Put that against your travel and transport, or potentially even energy, it's actually less than some people might imagine. That said, when we start to add these 1% factors together, you end up with a much bigger change. Again, it's a personal decision for many people what menu they would like to eat and what menu you're prepared to offer. As a compromise, quite a few corporates, and I would put the kind of HQ meetings for pharmaceuticals within that, are offering, if you're there for a day and a half, one entirely meat-free meal and leave the others as is. There's not many brave enough who've said this entire meeting will be meat-free. We'll see how the behavior changes. That's yet another thing for you planners to try and wrestle with as you compete with everything else. So there's some of the things to think about, to take back. We're always happy to advise, and there are a lot of agencies out there, professional conference organizers and creative events agencies who are familiar with pharmaceutical meetings and the governance framework that you have to work in. So there's a lot more to consider than there used to be. Some people are really on it. Other planners we see are a little bit old school. shall we say. So we've looked at the measurement that you need to measure. We've looked at some mitigation. The last and final topic that is advised around, thank you, Kirsten, I'll come back to you on that one shortly, at United Nations: measure, mitigate, offset. Our job at Event Decision is to measure and advise. There are a number of channels you can do for offset, and you might find your clients or your organization already has an offset channel. It's a somewhat divisive, but probably the least worst solution we have. There's two types. There's removal, as we call it here, sequestration, essentially planting, or biodiversity, planting trees to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. Or there's the avoidance or renewable energy that you can't, I believe, invest in the UK right now for carbon credits to stop emissions being created in the first place. But to give you an idea of what, because everybody talks about tons of CO2. How many trees do I need to plant? This conference is responsible for 100, 500, 5,000 tons of CO2. What does a ton of CO2 look like? The answer, when the computer catches up, is, that's disappeared again, isn't it? Is apologies. This is 1 ton of CO2. This is equivalent to filling up 4 London double-decker buses. Apologies for the non-UK watchers. I'm assuming that you know the rough size of one of these buses. So it is not the emissions of 1 bus. It is the equivalent of filling up the volume of that bus with carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, all these different gases that are qualified as CO2, as CO2 equivalents. I promised you at the beginning a couple of examples of where event planners have remained in Zombieland, as we sometimes refer to them, and sometimes where some really good practice. We'll deal with the Zombieland first. This is one that, don't read too much into the pictures. They're primarily there to remind me what to talk about. But we've got, along the bottom row, they're trucking. Exhibition stands especially tend to use a lot of materials. They tend to be built by somebody that you know, that you trust, and that you've used before, because they're the public face of your brand. Also, they're subject to procurement agreements, which can take in a really wide geography. So we have seen and measured stands that are built at one end of Europe and trucked over 3,000 kilometers to a congress center. Almost 3,000 kilometers. Last week, I think we saw Poland down to Athens with one articulated lorry with really quite a small stand on it. Try and use vehicles associated with the size. I know this is your supply side, but try and insist on vehicles the size of the payload. But B, there are excellent stand builders across this continent, across the world. It can make a huge difference to build locally. I'll give you a figure about that in just a sec, because in a good example. The second picture there of the car launches are notorious for wanting to wine and dine journalists. I know this is outside of Pharma. We were asked to measure recently a car launch in California, luxury brand, lovely car, hybrid as it turned out, billed as a sustainable launch. It was launched in California to European journalists who were all flown business class, over 120 of them from all over Europe into the States for this 36-hour event. Now, we applaud sustainable vehicles, or more sustainable vehicles, but not launching them the other side of the world. We're pretty sure Europe is capable of hosting 5-star ride and drives if that's what's required. And lastly, of the less potentially good practice, we were asked to measure a global customer engagement event for a luxury brand, which was a 5-star in London, 5-star hotel buyout and everything associated with it. Client was really keen for us to measure the effect of the table centers for the dinner of one night, which were made well, actually, they look really good, out of materials for schools. We're going to go on to schools of whatever nature afterwards. So pens, papers, stationery, etc. They look really cool, and they did go on. But we're less interested in the 11 private jets that were flown long haul from around the world to take part in said meeting. If you recall, we tend to show the footprint in a circular, in a pie chart form. 98% of that was associated with these types of flights. So that's 3 examples of how event planners haven't really moved. They're talking the game, but you're not actually doing it. Conversely, we've seen some really good examples. We've seen agencies, and both in comms and in events and production, changing process entirely and forcing their clients to measure the effect of their events and putting that information in front of their clients. Haven't yet seen agencies turning business down for less sustainable events, but maybe that will come. The central one there is an example of a schematic of a stand. Some really large pharma brands are now looking at how these things are built and where they're built, and are relaxing the rules around who builds them to enable stands not to be shipped across Europe. And we undertook an exercise for an agency recently that compared what they used to do in zombie or pre-COVID or traditional land of building it, they happen to be UK based, in the UK and shipping these things to Europe, or building them in Europe, 10 to 15 kilometers around the convention center, where funnily enough, stand builders have had a bit of foresight to set up. The difference in carbon footprint was some 40%. So you can use that in your environmental pieces, and you can use that in your commercial pieces to make you more sticky with your client, but also on the sustainability front. And we are seeing an adoption of more sustainable principles alongside those across a range of types of agencies. And we're seeing meetings move. The last one, European flag. We're seeing meetings of European energy companies and other massive global brands who might otherwise go to the Middle East or Singapore because they're on a global rotation, remain in the country of origin for some of their internal meetings, because it reduces the flights of 50% of those people attending and has corresponding effect on the carbon footprint. So there's a bit of best practice and so forth, and some images, and I'm sure Peter will has these decks, and we're happy to put it out there and share if you've got any questions. There were a couple of questions that have come through. So
do you want to just take the questions that have come in so far, and we'll lead off from there? Yeah. So
Jacob said,
yeah.
Congresses have a 1.2 billion carbon emissions. What percentage of the total world carbon emissions? It's, Jacob, we find it really hard to separate specific meetings, even within the industry. We could probably find you something that says, actually, the events industry contributes this much, and pharmaceutical industries this much. There are a lot of stats out there. I have even seen, and this has gone through the UK government as well, one of their select committees, that the pharmaceutical industry as a whole contributes more to global warming in terms of emissions than the automotive industry, because of the massive manufacturing base that these guys have. Good, bad, indifferent, that's for us to make individual decisions. That specific statistic was from 2019, from a recognized events industry publication, Conference News, that said we were 1.2 billion tons, the events industry. But as I said, the events industry crosses aviation, accommodation, hotels, transport, so many different. So that's one we use just to show an order of scale. As to its accuracy, you will be as good a judge as us. Kirsten asks, have people surveyed the attitudes of event attendees around the use of transport and food options? If they have, they tend to keep that data to themselves. Sadly, we haven't seen any cross-industry ones as yet. Mostly events industry focus is on how important is sustainability rather than the factors within it. We've seen some data around venue selection. In the UK, the sustainability of a venue, however you define that, is equally important as budget, quality, and service offering. In the States, this is correct. In the States, sustainability came in out of 10 different factors, last bar one. So in the States, perhaps, and far below kind of security, physical security. So the order of priorities across the world is very different. There's an event later this month called Micebook Ventures, which is 2.5 to 3 days long, and this is entirely plant-based. So it's starting, but that event is focused on sustainability in events. Most events that we've seen and measured are at most offering one plant-based meal per day or across the program. Maybe public perception and tastes, literally tastes, will change. Kate. The calculations are all come from certified databases such as EcoInvent or DEFRA. So we know how much in a particular country the average car emits per kilometre, per passenger kilometre, same for all the different modes of transport. So that's what we tend to use. In terms of the variability within events, we often do pre-event calculations. And there the data can be really scarce. If you guys are planning something for Q3 next year, you don't really know how many people are going to go. You don't know how many meals and teas and coffees and so forth, which is the level of detail we go to, are going to be served. Nobody does. But we're a team of, give or take, 8 people here. We're all event planners and have been for a range of industries, customers, different types of events. So we know approximately. So pre-event, we often do the same as your event budgets. We will do, you guys as planners, you'll do a pre-event budget maybe a year out. Can we make this work? How does it work? Roughly how much is it going to cost? That's like a pre-event carbon report. And then afterwards, you do your reconciliation, you've got your invoices, you've got your real numbers, and you do a final budget. That's how much the event cost. And we do the same with a post-event evaluation on events. John, how does pharma rank versus other industries? Depends who you ask, I think, is the real question. Yeah, it went through the UK Parliamentary Select Committee saying pharma as a whole, including all the manufacturing and distribution, creates more global emissions than automotive, which is one that makes us sit up because we hear all the time about exhaust and tailpipe emissions being really, really bad. I'm sure if one looked hard enough, one can find something that says actually pharma's not that bad. Pharma events can be quite high within the events industry benchmark because people can travel a long way. Who are we to say that healthcare professional A from the US should not attend something in Azerbaijan, for example, Congress, to continue his or her professional development, expertise in healthcare, and that knowledge come back to treat us? So congresses can be, and they're a particular, not bugbear, but they're an issue that needs looking at. The events industry hasn't quite got there yet with congresses. I think primarily because they're just an absolute ton of stakeholders. Sarah says, event giveaways. Yes, I can give to Peter after this, and Peter, you can share if you wish. There are some companies that specifically concentrate on more sustainable giveaways. Have I got one here? Oh, yes, tend to actually pure chance. I'll hold it, label away. This was a giveaway last week at an event in London. If you can even tell what it is, it's made out of lovely cheap plastic, and there were bowls and bowls, like fish bowls, like the old business card, put them in bowls of these damn things. Hopefully they're a hangover from COVID. They're to push open and pull open doors. I mean, there we are. There's lots of, you know, Peter, you were about to say.
No, I was losing track of you slightly there. That was an example of a not very good.
That's not very good
Item
plastic.
from a sustainability. Exactly.
He's going to end up in the bin. There are lots of things. I mean, do we need more USB sticks? Do we need more biros? It's you know, it's for you. It's your event. There might be something that's really, really good. that we
But there
might.
is a balance to be struck, isn't there, Matt? And we've talked a bit about this. I mean, I know there's a particular meeting I've been organising with lots of people involved, and I'm sort of intrigued how very different people's opinions are around this topic and how strongly some people feel about it. So I think I've said to you before about, someone gave me a lot of grief basically about the fact that I'm printing up some event guides, and I just think that's a useful, simple thing to do for people who are going to be there. But they thought that it's just like, Peter, we shouldn't print anything, full stop. And you go, well, in which case, why are you getting in your car and traveling to the venue and all the rest of it? There's a line to be struck, and I think it's about balance. And it's about what is the purpose. So, I mean, you've touched on the fact that we're running an event today where people around the world are coming in and they're watching this, and for an hour or so, we've got a good bit of engagement, and that's great. I wouldn't try and do this in Oxford, but a meeting, for instance, one of my careers meetings, which is about people meeting each other, you've actually not got any choice because you can't do that online. And then it's how do you get that balance right? But people have very, very strong views, and that from one extreme, which is we cannot do anything, and we have to be seen not to do anything, but we'll still jump in a car or on a plane and come to it, to the other extreme, which is like, oh, for goodness sake, once we've made the decision we're going to do it, then the cost of a bit of paper or something is irrelevant. I just find that interesting, and the stakeholders involved. So does the agency challenge the client that much? Just who leads who, and the audiences, how much are they driving some of this stuff? There's lots of, I've found, very conflicting evidence. Some surveys will talk about how the opinion leader types, the older types, want to go to meetings still because that's how it works, and their egos and their networking and stuff. Others that go, well, they're exactly people who don't want to travel because they want to just zoom themselves in and do a presentation and go back to their clinic. Younger people, much more worried about the sustainability. Or another survey, they're much more interested in the networking. There's lots of conflicting type data out there, isn't there?
There is, and it varies and it evolves almost weekly. And you're right, this is a really passionate subject for a lot of people. It touches more than just, it's the thing I do at work. And we've yet to see how this plays out. Of course we have. It is, event decision is a year and a half, not even a year and a half old now. And you saw some of the brand names we're working with. 10 years ago, this was pie in the sky. And if you were worried about sustainability, you'd be put in a certain bracket somewhere. Now, thoroughly mainstream, but does have to grow up. Hence the zombie reference. Event planners are working really hard. It's usually a young person's, I can't see any of you, so I'm assuming it's a young person's game, organizing events. And there's a lot to contend with. And we know this is just one element of it. There's everything else has to, look absolutely perfect and professional, especially in pharma land nowadays as well. But it is growing. It is becoming more and more important because it's highly visible.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to be seen to be doing the right thing. And then the problem with that is, or can be, that you tick the obvious points so that it's seen to be doing the right thing, and then you forget about what's underneath it. That's, I guess, what you've already touched on. Let's just step out a couple of things. We've only got a few minutes, but let's just pull out. If I'm a venue and I want to start putting myself forward as a more sustainable venue, what am I doing? What can I do? Simply, are there some headlines that you could just go, well, as a venue, you can do this, that, and the other, and you're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can combine this with Sarah's question around. And it's
I was going to come on to Sarah. That was my next question.
Sarah,
okay,
it's a very frequent question about digital signage versus print signage, and also answers your event booklet that you're printing, because purpose is the word you used. Purpose is the word we will come back to. If you're London Olympia and you've got an enormous digital sign on the front of your building that's being used 24 hours a day, 360 days of the year, digital's great, isn't it? You're going to get a lot of use out of that plastic and LED panels and all the good or bad things that are within those panels. If you're doing something that is single use, and look, even we use paper here still sometimes. It's recycled, and it comes from recycled paper and it goes into recycling. But do we need to buy, or renting's much better, but do we need to buy? I heard the other day someone bought 300 TVs for their series of congresses to truck them around Europe, to be used probably 8 days of the year. That tech has a life cycle of 3 years. I know I'm old, but it seems to get shorter. And then we've got to get rid of it. So common sense, I would say, around digital versus print. There's some very sustainable print solutions, both in terms of the inks and the materials. And if you're sensible about how you distribute that, a lot of event planners carry bags of stuff when they travel. Rather than necessarily, if a venue for a breakout room in a symposium has a screen outside it, use it, of course. You don't need to go and hire bus stops and get them bus stop stands and get them transported to the venue and put your print in it. Use what's there, be sensible. A lot of this stuff isn't rocket science. It's just what is, the reports that we produce, the data that goes into these brands, all about consumption. How much stuff are you consuming to put on this event, whether it's a flight, whether it's print, whether it's food and beverage? If you can minimize the amount of stuff without materially affecting the ROI or the engagement of your event, you're doing a good thing. Sometimes you do need to print things. I know event apps are all the rage now, and actually they do fulfill a lot, but they're expensive. Peter, do you want to build an app or rent an app for a one-day event for a few hundred people? Possibly not. The event has to be financially viable for those people who are hosting it too. So I would just say, Sarah, directly, we haven't seen any data that can back up this, but our thoughts based on what we've seen is be sensible. If it's single use, try and do it really sustainably with sustainable materials and printer ink and so forth. Printers are much better at this now. And if it's part of infrastructure that's there already, use it. If you're going to put a sign up 300 days a year, rent or buy the equipment and use that for 300 days of the year and plan to do something with it afterwards. We don't have any reports on one versus the other. We're asked this question all the time, which probably means there's a dearth of information and it's not easy to do.
Okay, just picking up just pinning you down a little bit on Sarah's specific question earlier on. I'm just curious, have you seen situations where people have said, we're not giving a branding item today, but we'll contribute to a charity on your behalf or something, as opposed to planting trees, things are slightly different. But I just wonder, how far can you take that idea? And have you seen anyone actually do that and whether it works in practice?
Yeah, we see a lot of digital platform providers for events offering to plant a tree or do X, Y, or Z in return for engagement to buying their service. So we've seen quite a lot of, or at expo stands, you can say, for your business card. Each business card we receive, in the old fishbowl trick, we will plant a tree.
Or donate to a charity or something like that.
Yeah,
You've seen that.
That sort of stuff is all great. And from what we've seen, brands are desperate to be associated with a good purpose, whether it's biodiversity or more social type things. It's been around for a while in events where incentives would go off and spend a couple of days doing really nice things in a 5-star resort and then go and paint a changing room or weed some gardens or dig a well, or whatever that project is, without pandering to stereotypes there, hopefully, to give something back. Brands are really keen.
Is it fair, as the old bloke here, the old cynic and all the rest of it, to say that there might be an element of what's the right way of putting this? There's a high degree of privilege in there somewhere. Let's use it's an example close to home here. Okay, so I've got teenage kids. Some of their teenage kids' friends, the families are still traveling the world. Fly to Japan. And then they make a bit of a thing about it on Facebook or Instagram or something. We've planted some trees or something. Therefore, it doesn't matter that we just flown to Japan, which is a little bit of a problem when the kids are comparing where they're traveling and all the rest of it. But I suppose my point is, if you've got the money in order to prove your credentials, is there a problem inherently somewhere in there in terms of, a gap between the haves and the have-nots and all the rest of it just becomes worse. Inclusivity is all very well if you can pay for it, and we can do. I'm burbling a bit, but you see what I'm getting at. It worries me a little bit. I've got a badge on my shoulder that says I plant trees every time I go to a meeting. Hidden behind that is because I can afford to do so. And is that really an answer to the
We're
problem?
opening a box of worms here, Peter, but we'll gladly dive in. Yeah, I mean, this goes beyond events, does it not? Do you remember COP26 last year? It was a big event in Glasgow. All the leaders of the world came together. Lots of private jets there too. A lot was measured. Some was offset. When we talked about offset, I said it's a contentious subject. I've also heard it said that offset can be compared to me saying, do you know what, Peter? I've had a busy day. Tonight, I'm going to have a takeaway pizza and have it delivered to my house. You have to not eat for 2 days to make up for that excessive consumption. Is it the way of the world that money talks? Different conversation, potentially, yes. We saw around COP26, end of last year, a huge number of radio and TV ads about brands going carbon neutral. It's really simple to become carbon neutral. You just measure your effect and buy your way out of it with carbon credits. What's much harder, and you and I talked a little bit about B Corp before the recording started. B Corp's not specifically emission focused, but there are tools out there with which you can demonstrate real action, not just intent, real action. So it's all well and good to just go, we're going to carry on, we're going to do this events program. It created 100,000 tons of CO2e, and here's a big check, it all goes away. Yay, we're carbon neutral. Some would argue better than nothing. Isn't it better to try and drive out some of these emissions and the events industry is so keen, and I know it's a cliche, to build back better by taking on board some of the things we've talked about. We still need to meet, right? We can't go back and live in, well, we can, I guess, go and live in caves in sackcloth, as long as they have Wi-Fi, right? Congresses, trade shows, exhibitions still need to happen. We still trade. If you look at 1,000 people at a trade show, what would the footprint be if they had to go and visit all of their customers in turn, rather than do the majority in one day? So it is balance. And I think possibly, you know, working with some companies who are among the wealthier globally, we owe it to them, but to ourselves, to try and deliver their service or their product in the best way possible. Interpret best as you will. Our job is to interpret that in terms of emissions around event programs.
Okay, we probably should draw a line there because we've gone slightly over time, but I do find this absolutely fascinating, and I hope we've given people some good food for thought. I know I can say very simply that, you know, you're very happy to hear from people. So if anybody's online at the moment or watching this later on, please, the part of the point of these webinars is that you connect with each other. So please, LinkedIn is an easy way to contact Matt. But I think it does lead, there's 6, 10, I don't know how many questions going through my head, and it's just like, can't we go down this line, that line? There's lots to talk about. I guess I tell myself, if I'm at least thinking about it, I'm going in the right direction, I'm helping a little bit, and you know, but there's no magic answer here, and balance for me is what it's about, and it's not taking an extreme view. It's getting a bit of a balance, at least moving in the right direction.
We can sum it up in one sentence, if you'll allow us to. It is to be, and it has an acronym, HOW, to be honest about where you are in your journey, to be open about that journey, your sustainability journey, and where you want to be and where you are now, and to be willing, H-O-W, willing to start measuring and start taking some action. If you do those 3 things, the fear of being found out or the greenwash slogan, it goes away. But you are doing your best. Nobody expects everyone to solve this overnight.
Okay, but it's very interesting, and very interesting to talk to you specifically in the area where you are measuring all this stuff. So if anyone's wondering, you know, how, because that's a question I've had thrown at me, is like, well, it's all very well, but how does one measure this? I don't know how exactly you do it, but you've got some tools there and you can talk to people about that. So that's great. Okay, I'm going to draw the line there. For the people watching the video, the webinar today, don't rush away. We've still got 10 minutes or so. But if I'm you could give us a call, I'm gonna stop the recording if I can find the button, give us a wave and say goodbye and take care, everybody. Cheers. Bye.